Very good evening, viewers. Today's topic of discussion is state in medieval India. Today I welcome Professor R.P. Rana, who is professor in medieval Indian history and who has extensively worked on medieval India. Particularly his specialization is Mughals, and he has worked extensively on the Jats. His work, he has already published the major breakthrough work on rebels to rulers, and I welcome Professor R.P. Rana to this session. Welcome you, sir. Today's topic on state in medieval India, we are going to have two consecutive sessions on this. The first one, which we are right now we are taking. In the first session we are going to discuss largely the state structures, how it formed under the Delhi Sultans, and immediately after the establishment of the Turkish Sultanate in India. And in the second session we are going to largely focus on the state formation under the Mughals. So in this very session we would be focusing on the Delhi Sultan. As we all are aware that 1192 is the Battle of Tarain, where largely all the Rajput fortunes were more or less sealed, and medieval India was going to enter into a new phase where a new alien power had come and established their rule. Those were the Turks, and by we all are aware that how Muhammad Ghori or Muhammad bin Sam, who defeated Prithviraj Chauhan in 1192, and very soon by 1206 though he died, and his successor Qutubuddin Aibak, who succeeded and real founder of the Delhi Sultanate, though he was Iltutmish, but the state was founded by Qutubuddin Aibak. Now, in this, how the state, when we are going to discuss about the state formation, the very interesting point to note is that this is for the very first time that Muslim or Islamic rulers were going to rule over a territory which was largely its subjects were non-believers. So the dilemma of you will find in the writings or in the rulers had the dilemma that how if they had to follow the strict rules of the Sharia, how they were finding the dilemma, and it was very difficult for them to strictly implement the rules of Sharia or the religious, to follow the religious state laws as they were doing. There was no dilemma immediately when they were occupying. So this was the major dilemma when we are going to discuss the entire state formation, particularly under the Delhi Sultan. This is the major problem you will be finding that we would be discussing. Now the important aspect about the statecraft, nature of the statecraft, there were two major historians or contemporary chroniclers that were speaking about them. One, we can pick up the very early Fakhre Mudabbir, who has written Adabul Harb wa Shujat. He speaks on almost 12 chapters in his Adabul Harb. He is devoting on the vices and virtues of the king and what should be the rules of the governance. He was largely writing during Iltutmish reign, that is 1210 to 1236, which is the Iltutmish ruled during that period. So he was writing Fakr Mudabbir was writing during Iltutmish's reign, and you will find that these dilemmas, because of these dilemmas, you will not find that the clear-cut ideas about the statecraft, what the state had to do while Fakr Mudabbir was writing. And in the second important contemporary chronicler, who is also a great historian of the 13th century, 14th century, that is Ziauddin Barni. This was the time, 14th century, he was writing his book. The first, he has written two, Tarikh-e-Firoz Shahi and Fatwa-e-Jahandari. When we are discussing about the statecraft, then we would be more focusing on his Fatwa-e-Jahandari, or the precepts on governance. The period when he is writing, we know that the Delhi Sultanate was firmly footed. So in Barni's writing, we would find that rather comparatively more concrete, in more concrete forms, he is writing whole treatise on Fatwa-e-Jahandari, the precepts on governance. So the rules were comparatively more or less laid down. So what these historians were arguing about, the contemporary chronicler were speaking about, I'll just give a brief, and then we'll have a more greater discussion with Professor R.P. Rana, that how on the basis of these two historians, how the contemporary historians have articulated on the statecraft, growth of statecraft during the Sultanate period. Now, as I just mentioned, that I was discussing that how Fakr Mudabbir, though he was discussing on the just ruler or the just state or the oppressive state, he was emphasizing that, but his prime concern all through was that the state must possess the power. The rulers and the ruling class must possess the power. While if we see what Barni was discussing about the nature of the statecraft, while he was also speaking about the just ruler who should be working for the welfare of the ruling class as well as the welfare of the subjects. Though he was also speaking about the vices and virtues of the high-born and the low-born. He was highly protective, and rather he was highly emphasizing upon that what should be, that the highest offices should be given to the high-born. When Azizuddin Muhammad Tughlaq reign, Azizuddin Khammar as well as Pir Amali were given the highest offices. Pir Amali was entrusted with the office of Diwan-e-Wizarat, which was one of the highest offices of the center. Then he was highly critical of these low-born. So he was very much emphasizing upon the concept of high-born, and was not in favor of providing the highest offices. But at the same time, he is also speaking about that the justice and the welfare of the masses should be the prime concern of the state. And so he was, on the one side, he was emphasizing on that highest offices should be given to the high-borns. On the other side, jizya, when there is a calamity or there is a need, then the subject should be equally protected. He was advocating that in case of calamity, jizya should not be imposed upon the masses, or in times of need, or supposedly there was a famine, then the charity should be opened by this is the duty of the state. Now Another important aspect that Barni and Fakhre Mudabbir's writings were emphasizing upon, that as I was discussing, that how the dilemma that these contemporary chroniclers facing, that it is the religion, the masses were not sharing the same religion as that of the ruler. So if they would be following or implementing or ruling as per the Islamic law, then because of that it was not practical. So we find that in Barni's writings, that the concept of Zil al-Allah, that means that the emperor or the sultan was addressed as Zil al-Allah, means shadow of God on earth. That means he was addressed as part of the God or the Almighty. So in case of any contradiction, because he is closer to the Almighty, in case of contradiction of any law, then in a way his rules or his strictures should be accepted as the final word. So the concept of putting of Zil al-Allah was in a way they were trying that the king's policies should have a final word. This means that if contradiction between a siyasat, means political expediency, and religious, if there is a clash between religious ideas, then always the political expediency or siyasat must prevail. If we pick up the thread from here, then could you, Professor R.P. Rana, could you elaborate little bit more on how, whether the Delhi Sultanate was an Islamic state or it was a theocratic state, how we can view the state during the Sultanate under the Delhi Sultan, how it worked?
Thank you very much, Professor Abbas Singh, for inviting me to this discussion to begin with. And your interesting, comments on I will begin with that on the Fakhre Mudabbir and Ziauddin Barni. First of all, the problem is that, these two sources are quite complicated for writing the history of Delhi Sultanate. Complicated in the sense, as Peter Hardy has, already pointed out, that a historian has to work a lot, go behind what they are writing, the intentions of these authors, etc., and then only they can construct a proper history, So with this limitation, or say, of the sources, despite these limitations of these sources, there are many historians who have, by depending on these sources alone, leaving aside, this coins, epigraphy and other sources, archaeology, etc., they have been able to construct the history of the Delhi Sultanate. But today we are not going to discuss the history of the Delhi Sultanate as such, but the nature and the structure of the Delhi Sultanate. And there are many scholars who have commented very extensively on the nature of this Delhi Sultanate. To begin with, there is one scholar, namely A.B.M. Habibullah. While writing his book, The Foundations of Muslim Rule in India, he basically said that the Muslim character to this Sultanate was imparted because of constant Hindu aggression against the Sultanate, Thereby, he is of the opinion that the Delhi Sultanate, in fact, did acquire a kind of theocratic, character. But this, in fact, later on, there are some recent scholars who are also, by applying modern tools of analysis, etc. Despite that, some later scholars, such as Peter Jackson, who also found that the Delhi Sultanate was the sole bastion of Muslim power in India. That's the statement which I have taken from his book, Delhi Sultanate. So therefore, there is a stream of historians who have been arguing that the Delhi Sultanate was a theocratic state. And this, in fact, they are also using the same sources which have been used by other scholars also who have questioned such a character of the Delhi Sultanate. Now, to begin with, the first scholar who in fact went outside this framework of theocratic versus secular this thing was Muhammad Habib. Muhammad Habib has done a lot of work on the Delhi Sultanate, writing on extensively on the nature of Delhi Sultanate and character of the Delhi Sultanate. In fact, he came to the conclusion that the Delhi Sultanate was basically a revolutionary state, and he emphasized the egalitarian character of the state. In his that introduction to Eliot Dawson's that second edition, there also in that lengthy introduction, he in fact expresses this opinion more extensively under the rubric that the Delhi Sultanate in fact brought about. He says that urban and rural revolution and urban revolution, etc. Thereby he says that the Sultanate in fact liberated a large number of Hindus both in the urban areas and in the rural areas, because the rulers who came here, in fact they had an ideology which was basically an egalitarian ideology, and this egalitarian ideology in fact not only liberated large number of Hindus from the clutches of the oppressive caste system, but also it led to the expansion of economic resources which reinforced the economic foundation of the state itself. That is one important viewpoint which was later on taken up by his son Irfan Habib, Professor Irfan Habib, while writing on this Burmese theory of the Delhi Sultanate. Habib in fact says that if we analyze the way he has, though he has used religious categories, etc., there is a notion of he frequently uses words like kufr, jihad and all these things, sharia, and he emphasizes that the ruler should conform to sharia, etc. But in practical terms, when it comes to the arena of governance, there we find that sharia was not to be sought to be implemented so rigorously as has been argued by some other scholars like IBM Habibullah, etc. What Habib is saying, Irfan Habib is saying basically that Burni was building a legitimacy for a class state, a state which is dominated by the upper class. This upper class could be basically, and from that he does not rule out the Hindus.
Upper class means the highborn
people, these people.
He was pro the Turks. Highborn means the Turks he was emphasizing.
Turks also, and basically he was, when he was poo-pooing the Hindus, he was not using it in that religious sense. He was basically putting them in the category of lowborn. That is why they should be excluded from power, etc. And then there is an interesting, in this basically Morland's work are on economic history. But while working on economic history, he did comment on the nature of the Delhi Sultanate, and there at one place you will find in a very inchoate, form, not very clearly, stated form. This he is characterizing the Delhi Sultanate as a potent factor in the distribution of national income. That is a theory later on which was developed by other people also, that the state was not only exploitative, but it was also a kind of redistributive state also. That's there not very explicitly,
So we'll come to that, whether it was a centralized empire, whether the state was centralized or not. First, let us take it little further. So do you agree that it was the state Delhi Sultanate was basically Islamic in character, but not theocratic? Do you go by this, or it was a theocratic? You will
no, when we say Islamic, I mean it's if the Sultan is a Muslim, so that does not make it Islamic, That does not make it Islamic, Like I mean the religion of the Sultan was something. Then we have to characterize all regimes by the religion of the ruler, No,
there is a difference between theocracy and Islamic state. So if you are...
So I will use that some kind of, this type of, this, because these Islamic and theocratic and all these, they have become very value loaded, terms, in historiography, Therefore, in order to avoid that, I think one can use some categories which have been invented by this Marshall Hodgson, inventor of Islam, and there he has used two categories basically, Islamicate and Indic, So it was a kind of Indic Islamicate state, You can use, one can agree with that,
You will agree with
Instead of saying Islamic state, it can be in Islamicate and Indic state, that way, basically.
Because largely, though they were the Islamic, but if we take that, it goes by that statement as well. If we see that there was a conversation between Alauddin Khalji and Qazi Mughis, when he was saying, Qazi Mughis was emphasizing that, look, you are not following strictly what the Islamic law is. So Alauddin Khalji was arguing that I do not know what is the law of Shariat, but I will go by what is the need of the time. So this goes by that largely it was
in practice
it was neither theocratic nor Islamic.
And also apart from this one instance from the period of, as you have mentioned, this Qazi of Bayana, the dialogue between Alauddin Khalji and there is earlier also during the period of Altmas, when someone advised him that why don't you extirpate these Hindus, the Altmas reacted saying that Muslims are like salt in the food, so we are nothing, we cannot, it's not so possible. So taking this argument of impossibility also as making it a practical, that be practical there also. Apart from these instances, that the great mighty rulers, they are arguing against this type of, projection of the state. There are other instances also. For example, the state did legislate. There is a lot of legislation during this period which is not in conformity with the Sharia. Lot of this Jawabit, under the category Jawabit, it was allowed that the people, they could do. Now it is not totally in contradiction with Sharia, but Sharia basically, when it comes here, in between these rulers, they had been inheriting lot of political traditions of the Sassanid empire, these rulers, and I think this notion of justice they had inherited from this Nosherwa, who was a Sassanid ruler, and it has been repeatedly emphasized in the writings of other scholars before Barni and Fakhr Mudabbir, earlier also Nizamuddin Ahmad Tusi and other scholars also, and Ghazali also. These people also have been emphasizing on the this notion of justice, that the state policy should be guided by justice, So justice becomes important, and here again, as you were saying earlier in one statement, that Jahandari is overtakes Deendari,
Yes, Jahandari. So
in practice,
we agree that Islamicate or the Indo-Islamicate you will call it.
Obviously, today there is hardly any serious scholar of medieval Indian history who will agree that it was a theocratic state.
Then another important issue, if we take up the Mughal state, the Sultanate, then the major argument that is given for, and particularly if we analyze the polity 7th to 12th century and post 12th century polity and the Delhi Sultans, then important issue which is being argued that prior to 1200 the polities were decentralized, fragmented polities, and it goes to the credit of the Delhi Sultans that they have centralized the entire polity. How you will go about or argue about it, whether the Sultanate had actually highly centralized polity, or it was something?
I think for the pre-Sultanate period also, there is no consensus among historians that it was a fragmented policy. There are many scholars. It was a fragmented policy of decentralized polity.
Fragmented polity.
It was a feudal polity. This is the argument of the school of Indian feudalism,
R.S. Sharma.
R.S. Sharma, etc., is the founder of that school. But if you look at the recent writings on this period by B.D. Chattopadhyay and others, Harman Kulke, you will find that they are not accepting this thing. They are saying that basically B.D. Chattopadhyay propounded a notion of integrative state, that during this period a lot of integration is taking place, and Harman Kulke, by using this concept of a processual state, he also said that in fact fragmentation is not taking place so much, but more and more, people who are outside this state society, this complex state society, these people are in fact being brought into the state society.
It was a sign of a consolidation at the
expansion also,
expansion and consolidation
of state society.
So
therefore they are not accepting this thing. So, and similarly, following from that, people have been arguing about analyzing the nature of the Delhi Sultanate also.
First, could you highlight on those who argue on this that the Delhi Sultanate was a centralized polity? If you can, we can first highlight the main features who argue on that, and then we can go what the counter argument is being put forth by the
there is a strong opinion which says that Delhi Sultanate was a highly centralized state, and this opinion is basically found in the scattered writings of what historians call the Aligarh school historians, historians belonging to the Aligarh school. Most of them, they have been writing on this, and they have been, and now recently they have been questioned on various counts by other scholars. But first of all, to begin with, you will find that there is a slow process of the centralization of the Delhi Sultanate. It does not get centralized in one go, and if you find basically that it is only after Balban that we find that there is a strong centralization starts taking place, because all of the period of Iltutmish is basically a period of crisis. He is all the time, battling here and there. Ultimately, he succeeds in 1229 in bringing the entire country under his control, that time.
So the argument,
most of the large part of India was subjugated by Alauddin Khalji. He extended in the south also, there Alauddin Khalji, and under the Tughlaqs also it continued. Towards the last years of Muhammad bin Tughlaq's reign, you will find that a lot of Amiran-e-Sada, they started rebelling, and they started establishing their own kingdoms here and there, and this process under Firuz Shah Tughlaq, Sayyids and the Lodhis, you will find the fragmentation again takes place.
So the first argument which is given for the centralized state, that the entire almost large part of India brought under one single rule, you argue that it was not, and actually the fragmentation, the real consolidation started from Balban's reign onwards, and soon fragmentation. But how would you place then the consolidation that began as early as Iltutmish's reign, when he consolidates the have a Turkane-Chehilgani and introduces the Ikta system? So how will you put?
I think these two institutions, Ikta and Kharaj, which were brought by these from the Islamic East, that country, the earlier experience.
Kharaj means land revenue.
Land revenue. They were introduced here, and this with the help of these two institutions, these people were able to, whether they were able to implement them more successfully or not, because it is the degree of success of the implementation of these two institutions which will in fact have a greater this impact on the character of this the Sultanate itself. Now if you take Ikta system for example, or even Kharaj, during the period before Iltutmish, Delhi Sultanate under Qutbuddin Aibak and earlier also, it was these were some kind of garrison states. They were not states proper in that sense.
So you accept that it is a garrison state?
No, it was a garrison state at that time, and because they were just confined to the urban centers, and countryside was largely Mawas countryside,
So you are going with Professor Sunil Kumar's
No, I'm not going.
Argument.
Professor Sunil Kumar is this everybody will accept. There is no problem with this period. I am saying the later on with the say elimination of the Chehilgani, and with the rise of Alauddin Khalji, under the Khaljis and the Tughlaqs, we find that the Ikta system began to be implemented more effectively, and why do we say that, the notion of centralization, is should be centered around the Ikta system? Because Ikta means what, Ikta is assignment of revenues by the Sultan to his commanders, These persons, they were assigned iktas, to the extent that these commanders could be, transferred from one place to another place. That means the authority of the Sultan is very great. There is a centralization. And if he is not in a position to transfer them from one place to another place, that means the authority of these people are autonomous, and the authority of the power is not so much centralized, And now, similarly, in the system of this kharaj also, you will find that if the large amount of this money could flow into the central treasury, then naturally the economic resources of the Delhi Sultan himself will be, enormous, And therefore this command or this political command or the nobility and this ability to mop up, resources from the countryside, in fact, if that is evident, to me it is evident during the period of the Khaljis and the Tughlaqs, that is why there was extreme centralization during their period, Earlier there was not so much centralization, the Sultanate, but you brought the argument of Sunil Kumar. There I'll just bring some kind of caution, and that caution is that Sunil Kumar in fact gives these 100 years, designates these 100 years as a period of emergence of the Delhi Sultanate. I don't think Balban's period can be considered as a period of emergence. The Delhi Sultanate has come into existence as a political entity very clearly. So to include Balban's period into the period of emergence of the Delhi Sultanate, I think there is a problem there. The Sultanate was already there. And if somebody says that when the Sultanate emerged, I think I'll say that towards the end of the reign of Iltutmish, the Sultanate had become as a political entity, very powerful political entity. But still there were upheavals, there was continuous upheavals, and it was not as powerful. The concentration of power was, economic and political power was not as great as it becomes evident during the Khaljis and the Tughlaqs. And after Tughlaqs it starts declining again. There is a lot of contraction of the Delhi Sultanate under the Lodhis themselves, etc.
But if we largely you were when we look at that the state was centralized, not as centralized as it is. So the one argument that you have
no, I think the argument basically is about what is the nature of Ikta,
Ikta.
Whether Ikta was an agent of centralization or decentralization. I think if the
it was a processual, you'll call it.
No, I will not call it processual, but there are various stages in the evolution of the Ikta.
Because by Firoz Shah Tughlaq's reign, it turns into the hereditary, so gradually. And if we see Balban's period, he was eradicating the small Iktas. Alauddin Khalji has completely
and it is under Khaljis and the Tughlaqs that especially in the economic functioning of the Ikta itself, there is a lot of intervention. These people, they started, collecting revenue themselves. It was not left to the Iqtadar.
But important, even if, whether you accept or you can disagree with this point. One is that at least empire came under one single head. Not so many decentralized foci were there. One point. And another is that the kharaj, whether you accept that how effective kharaj was or land tax was, but uniform land taxation was there. It was one half uniformly, no intermediary, no classes were being left. Alauddin Khalji from Khots to Balahar, as Barni says, that implement. So it was again uniformity is there. Then one currency system, which was one sort of a nature of taxation. Even if we don't speak about the kharaj, even the other taxes. So where you are going to place this in your scheme, whether it was a centralized
state
or not?
Muhammad Habib, in his that wonderful essay,
introduction,
he in fact mentioned it that the Delhi Sultanate destroyed feudalism, feudal elements, it destroyed, and after that, whether it was liberating the peasantry or not is a different question.
Liberating the artisans or
it's a different question, because if the amount of exploitation, degree of exploitation is increasing on the peasantry, then I don't know how it was liberating them. So under Alauddin Khalji, it was not at all liberating in that sense, And but direct contact with the state and the peasantry, with the countryside, was established during this period. Now the intermediaries were, removed, done away with, and the removal of these intermediaries during Muhammad bin Tughlaq's period, in fact, led to a widespread, rebellion of the Khotsand Muqaddams in the Doab area. And I think then a lot of concessions were given to them, and I think there is a revival of these people, but under a different designation. They are not Khotsand Muqaddams, but under a different designation, Chaudhries and Zamindars, etc. But so therefore, the destruction of the earlier Hindu aristocracy, in fact, was a very long-drawn process also, but complete destruction did not take place, They were rehabilitated, they were coming under different categories, etc. They are being getting co-opted into the land revenue administration, etc. So they are becoming, in fact, functionaries of the state instead of enemies of the state, these people.
Then the entire discussion points towards one thing. There are two important issues. Whether we can call the Delhi Sultanate as a monolithic state, something that is being imposed upon the subjects who were by the rulers, or we can call it that it was a processual. Means it was through complex networks of advices, policies, and multiple actions that the state was evolving. I mean to say that it was articulated, there was a need of the time and other local factors that were instrumental in the formation of the state.
I think, see, the problem here is that there is no direct evidence of the acceptance of the authority of the state by the defeated Hindu, this aristocracy, But gradually, when we see, there is no evidence of its confrontation also, So the confrontation evidence is also disappearing. That means gradually people are getting acculturated to it, They are getting, used to it, and they are getting acculturated to it. And that means the state, in fact, with this process of this acculturation, the state is also, the state is also, reaching the countryside, reaching thereby means its subjects also. The state is no more a garrison state, it's a very...
So we can conclude, if we have to conclude about the Delhi Sultanate, two important points that we had discussed. One was that it was neither theocratic, not completely Islamic, though the rulers were, the religion of the rulers were Islam, but they were acting as per the need of the time. And another important aspect or issue that we have discussed about whether it was highly centralized state or not, as we were discussing that how it was not a monolithic organization, but it was evolving through various processes, whether we take a ICTA system or whether we take any other institution, kharaj or taxation. It was actually, the state was not monolithic, but it was processual in nature. Thank you, Professor Rana, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you.